It all started when I noticed the small changes in Jessica. My wife, the woman I had been married to for 10 years, began to feel like a stranger. I remember one Tuesday evening, she was rushing out the door, an unusual urgency in her stride. I asked where she was going and she snapped back, "Just out for a drink with some friends." Friends. Suddenly, she had friends I had never heard of. I shrugged it off at first, figuring maybe I was just being paranoid. After all, we had a young son, Alex, and life gets busy. But the whispers in the back of my mind wouldn't quiet down. In the following weeks, her late-night outings became a routine. I'd be putting Alex to bed, and she'd be getting dressed in a way that felt too deliberate, too rehearsed. I noticed how she'd apply her makeup with a precision that seemed more suited for a hot date than for a casual night out. Each time she returned, she'd flash me that bright, phony smile, but it was hollow. I could feel it. One night she came home reeking of cologne that definitely wasn't mine, and when I asked her about it, she laughed it off, claiming it was from some guy at the bar who spilled his drink. But it wasn't just the late nights. I found her phone buzzing incessantly with texts from a number I didn't recognize. She would snatch it up before I could even catch a glimpse of the screen, making some excuse about having to respond to a work emergency. I started to check her social media in secret, scrolling through her friends list to see if someone new had entered her life. And that's when I saw him, Ryan, our son's babysitter. A 20-something guy with a chiseled jaw and a flashy smile that made my blood boil. The day I finally confronted Jessica, it was one of those gray, rainy afternoons. I came home early from work, the feeling of dread hanging in the air as I walked through the door. I found her on the couch, blissfully scrolling through her phone, a carefree look in her eyes that felt like a slap in the face. I took a deep breath and blurted out, "Are you sleeping with Ryan?" The room fell silent. It felt like an eternity. Before she looked up, confusion morphing into what I can only describe as sheer panic. "Of course not, that's ridiculous," she exclaimed, her voice sharp. She jumped up, trying to dismiss my accusation with a laugh, but I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. I pressed further, recounting the signs I'd seen, her behavior, the late nights, the perfume. Her excuses became more elaborate, her anger more pronounced, claiming I was jealous and controlling. "It's just a babysitter. You're making a mountain out of a molehill," she shouted, but the tension in her voice betrayed her. I could feel my heart racing, a mix of anger and betrayal coursing through my veins. I didn't want to believe I was right, but the evidence was stacking up against her. The more she denied, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Staring into her eyes, I saw a mixture of defiance and guilt. The moment was surreal, like some twisted dream, where the woman I loved was transforming into someone I didn't recognize. As she continued to dodge my questions, I felt my world beginning to unravel. I never thought I'd be that guy, the one left wondering if his marriage was a lie. Each denial felt like a blow, each excuse a knife twisting deeper. I realized then I had to do something. I could not let this go. The emotional toll was relentless, dragging me through a vortex of anger and sadness, and I knew I needed to make a plan. I needed to take control back. It wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about me reclaiming my life. I started to think about how I could confront this head-on, but first, I needed concrete evidence of her infidelity, something I could hold onto and use to confront the shattering reality of our marriage. A plan began to form in my mind, one that involved both the babysitter and Jessica in ways they would never expect. I was done being the victim. It was time for me to reclaim my power. As the sun set on that turbulent day, I spent the evening contemplating my next steps. I knew I needed to gather evidence, but I also needed to stay discreet. I couldn't let Jessica know I was onto her, not yet. I pretended everything was normal, cooking dinner while she scrolled through her phone, occasionally tossing me a comment about how the chicken was too dry. The facade felt suffocating, but I maintained my cool, determined to see this through. The very next day, I took a half-day off work under the guise of needing to handle an errand. Instead, I waited until Jessica left for another one of her girls' nights, and that's when I took action. I drove over to our local park where Ryan often took our son to play. I had watched him interact with Alex a few times before, But today, I needed to observe him closely, see if the chemistry I feared existed was real. I parked a little distance away and settled in for what felt like an undercover operation. About an hour into my stakeout, I spotted Jessica's car pulling into the park's lot. My stomach twisted in knots as I watched her get out, looking stunning in a black sundress, and immediately gravitating toward Ryan, who was leaning against a tree with a smug grin on his face. They exchanged flirtatious banter, too familiar for my liking, with Ryan brushing her shoulder and her laughing in a way that felt intimate. My heart raced as I captured the moment in my mind, but I knew I needed more than just a hunch. They didn't notice me as I slipped out of my car and started walking toward a nearby playground, pretending to check my phone. Each step felt like an eternity, but I had to get close enough to hear the conversation. To my horror, I managed to overhear snippets of their dialogue. "I can't believe we've been sneaking around for so long," Jessica said, and Ryan replied, "It'll be worth it when you finally tell him the truth." My breath caught in my throat. Those words hit hard, a chilling confirmation of my worst fears. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak, my vision blurring as I realized I was witnessing the betrayal firsthand. As they drew closer, shared laughter ringing out, I knew I was at a crossroads. Should I confront them both right there and then? Or should I wait, gather more evidence, and come up with a plan that would truly shake them? I decided to retreat. I needed to remain calm and collected, not give away my hand just yet. I headed back to my car, trying to process the emotions swirling inside me. I couldn't confront them without a solid plan. I needed to be strategic. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting inside me, but I also felt an ember of determination start to ignite. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, giving myself the independence I had unknowingly forfeited to her whims. Over the next couple of days, I kept tabs on Jessica's schedule. I had learned that the babysitter was often at our house after work, which made it easier for me to lay my groundwork. I began with a simple ruse. I hired a private investigator. His name was Ron, a grizzled veteran with a no-nonsense attitude, who assured me he could get the proof I needed without raising any alarms. I had no idea how this would unfold, but I felt a sense of relief knowing that someone else was in my corner. As Ron got to work, I continued my own covert operations, making sure to record any late-night texts and suspicious behavior. Each day brought new evidence, and with it, a growing resolve to take control of my life. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting. One moment I was angry, the next I was deeply saddened, and sometimes I felt numb to it all. But I clung to the idea of justice and independence, using it as my guiding light. On one particularly tense evening, as I waited for Ron to deliver his findings, I steeled myself for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. I envisioned how it would play out. I'd be calm, collected, and unwavering. I wouldn't allow Jessica's lies to pull me back into the vortex of confusion and heartbreak. I would confront her not just with the evidence of her infidelity, but also with a statement of my own independence and self-worth. The night Ron finally called to share his findings, I felt a wave of anticipation wash over me. I was ready to dismantle the illusion we had built together, and I was determined to show Jessica that I wasn't the man she had once manipulated. I wasn't just her husband. I was a father, and I was about to reclaim everything that mattered. The day came when Ron, the private investigator, met me at a quiet cafe to go over the findings. I sat across from him, my heart pounding in anticipation. He slid a folder across the table, and I opened it cautiously, half expecting to find evidence of a tragic misunderstanding. Instead, what lay before me were photos, clear images of Jessica and Ryan together, laughing, holding hands, and sharing intimate moments that shattered my heart all over again. "This is just from the past 2 weeks," Ron said, his voice steady but empathetic. "I could keep tracking them, but I think you have more than enough evidence here." The images felt like a punch to the gut, but they also provided a strange sense of clarity. It was no longer just my suspicions versus her denials. I had the proof in my hands, and I could finally confront her with the reality of what our marriage had become. I took the folder and my emotions swirled inside me. I had wanted to feel anger, maybe vengeance, but what I felt instead was a profound sense of loss. My marriage was not just a union, it had been my life, something I had fought for. But now it was crumbling before my eyes and there was no putting it back together. I thanked Ron, paid him for his services, and left the cafe feeling both empowered and devastated. That evening, Jessica returned home later than usual. I could see her carefree demeanor as she strutted through the door, her phone glued to her hand. She greeted me with a peck on the cheek and a flippant, "Hey, babe, just got back from the gym." I wanted to scream, to shake her, and demand to know how she could lie so easily. But I held myself together, knowing that the moment of truth was just around the corner. As the dinner hour approached, I decided to confront her. I made her favorite meal, not because I wanted to appease her, but because I wanted to sit across from her in our familiar setting as I dismantled her web of lies. I set the table with an air of calmness, but internally I was a tempest. "Jess, can we talk?" I asked as she settled into her chair. The casual conversation faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that hung thick in the air. She looked up, a flicker of concern passing through her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, but I could see her fidgeting, a sure sign that she knew something was brewing. "I know about you and Ryan," I said, my voice steady but low. Her face drained of color, and for a moment I thought I might have broken through her defenses. "I have proof, Jessica. I know you've been lying to me, and I can't pretend anymore." I slid the folder across the table, the contents spilling out like the reality of our shattered marriage. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the photos, each image striking her like a blow. This is ridiculous," she stammered, her bravado slipping away. "I can explain." "Explain what?" I shot back, my anger rising. "That you've been sneaking around with our son's babysitter, that you've been lying to me for months. I deserve to know the truth." She took a deep breath, her facade crumbling further. "It's not what you think. Ryan and I were just getting close. It's been stressful with Alex and I needed someone to talk to," she added, her tone shifting to one of desperation. "It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I echoed, incredulous. "You think that makes it okay? You think that justifies betraying everything we built together? You don't get to downplay this, Jess." I watched as her composure began to break. Tears filled her eyes, but I wasn't ready to feel sympathy for her. Instead, I felt a surge of clarity. I had been living in her shadow for far too long, and now it was time to take a stand. "You've made your choice, and it's clear you don't want this marriage. So what's next?" She attempted to regain some control, her tone shifting to anger. "You're just going to throw everything away? How can you be so cold? We can work this out." But I had already made my decision. "No, Jessica, you don't get to manipulate this situation anymore. This is not just a bump in the road. You've shattered my trust, and there's no coming back from that." The tears streamed down her face now, and I could see the mask she had worn for so long slipping away. The woman I had loved was still there, but she was buried beneath layers of deceit and betrayal. I felt a pang of sadness for the life we had shared, but I knew I had to be resolute. "I'm filing for divorce," I stated firmly, my voice unwavering. "I can't live this way anymore." She started to protest, but I raised my hand to silence her. "This isn't up for debate. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. I deserve to be happy, and I won't let your betrayal define me." With that, I stood up and walked away, leaving her there to process the consequences of her actions. I could feel my heart racing, but beneath that fear was a sense of liberation. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The road ahead would be tough, filled with heartache and uncertainty, but I would no longer be a victim of her treachery. I was ready to embrace the independence I had longed for. The days following my confrontation with Jessica felt surreal, like I was moving through a fog. I gave her the space she needed to process our breakup, but I also began taking steps toward my new reality. I could no longer afford to dwell on the pain. I had to focus on rebuilding my life and ensuring Alex would be shielded from the chaos. I decided to consult with a divorce attorney, someone who could help me navigate the legal intricacies and protect my interests as well as our son. The attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, took the time to explain my options. I felt a rush of emotion as she laid out the possibilities, but it also brought clarity. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom, I was fighting for Alex's future too. That realization pushed me forward. As I left the law office, a wave of anxiety washed over me. I felt unsteady on my feet but resolute. I was determined to keep my son's life as normal as possible, despite the upheaval around us. I made a point to keep our routines intact, playing with him at the park after school, reading bedtime stories, and sitting with him at the dinner table. Every smile he gave me reminded me of what I was fighting for. Jessica, for her part, seemed to be in a state of denial. She alternated between pleading with me to reconsider and attempting to downplay her actions. One evening, she approached me while I was putting Alex to bed. "Can we at least talk about this like adults?" she asked, her voice quivering. I could see the desperation in her eyes. "There's nothing to talk about, Jess. You've made your choices and I can't forget them. You're not the same person I thought I knew." She looked hurt, but I couldn't let that sway me. "Please, I'll do better," she begged, her voice cracking. "We can go to counseling. I'll stop seeing Ryan. I'll do anything." I shook my head, feeling the weight of my decision bearing down on me. "It's too late for counseling. You've already shown me who you are. I need to focus on Alex and what's best for him." The truth was, I barely recognized the woman standing before me. The Jessica I had loved had been replaced by someone who seemed willing to throw everything away for a fling. I felt an odd mixture of pity and anger. I wanted to scream, to shake her and make her see the gravity of her actions, but I held it together. There was no point in dragging this out further. As I continued down the path of the divorce, I learned more about myself than I had anticipated. I found strength in vulnerability, comfort in my friendships, and resilience in my determination to create a stable environment for Alex. I began reaching out to friends I had lost touch with over the years, admitting that I needed support. They rallied around me, providing encouragement and a sense of camaraderie that I had overlooked in my marriage. One evening, after a tough day at work, I met up with my friend Mike for a drink. We hadn't seen each other in a while, and I knew he had gone through a messy divorce a few years back. As we sat in the dimly lit bar, I opened up about everything: Jessica, Ryan, my feelings, the impending divorce. "Dude, I get it," Mike said, leaning back in his chair with a knowing look. "When my ex cheated, I thought I was broken. But trust me, this is an opportunity for you to find who you really are again." His words resonated with me. I realized that I had put so much of myself into being a husband that I had lost sight of my own needs and desires. The emotional impact of the betrayal was still there, but it was also a reminder that I had a chance to redefine my life. The more I surrounded myself with supportive friends, the more I began to feel like myself again. I took Alex to his soccer games, cheered him on from the sidelines, and watched as he developed friendships of his own. I wanted him to see that even in the midst of a storm, there was still joy to be found. As the weeks passed, the divorce process began to take shape. I filed the necessary paperwork, and Jessica's attempts to reconnect turned into frantic calls from her lawyer, pleading for mediation. I was resolute in my decision to move forward on my terms. I wouldn't give in to her guilt trips or emotional manipulation. I was reclaiming my independence. Eventually, we scheduled a formal mediation session. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to approach it with an open mind while firmly standing my ground. I wanted to ensure that Alex would be our primary focus, and I hoped that Jessica would recognize the importance of co-parenting responsibly. On the day of the mediation, I arrived feeling a mix of anxiety and resolve. The conference room was sterile, the air heavy with tension. Jessica walked in, looking surprisingly composed, though I could see the weariness etched on her face. We exchanged a glance, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of nostalgia for the life we had shared. But then I reminded myself of the truth, the betrayal, the lies. As we sat down with the mediator, I listened carefully as we discussed custody arrangements, child support, and the division of our assets. I was prepared to negotiate, but I also wanted to make it clear that I wouldn't allow her to manipulate the situation. I had come too far to let that happen again. Each time Jessica tried to push back, I stood firm. Alex's well-being is my priority, I stated, my voice steady. I want us to co-parent effectively, but we have to establish boundaries. The mediation dragged on, filled with uncomfortable silences and tense exchanges, but with each passing moment, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. I was no longer a passive participant in my life. I was taking charge, asserting my needs with clarity and determination. When we finally reached an agreement on custody arrangements, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start toward creating a new normal for Alex and me. As I walked out of that conference room, I realized that I was not just surviving, I was learning to thrive. I was taking control of my life, and the independence I had craved was finally within reach. The weeks following the mediation were a whirlwind of adjustment. Both Jessica and I had our own routines to establish, and while I felt a sense of relief at the custody agreement, the reality of co-parenting was proving to be more challenging than I had anticipated. Initially, Jessica remained civil, but I could sense her frustration bubbling beneath the surface. She texted me about pickup and drop-off times for Alex, but every message felt loaded with passive-aggressive undertones. For instance, she would say things like, "I hope you can make it to Alex's soccer game this weekend," as if she were trying to gauge my commitment as a father. I reminded myself not to rise to her bait. I was no longer playing her games. I decided to focus on creating a stable environment for Alex, one filled with love and support. I took him to each of his soccer practices, cheering him on with a pride I hadn't often felt in my role as a father. The joy on his face as he scored goals or made new friends started to heal some of the wounds I had from the past months. It felt good to be involved, to be present, and most importantly, to be his rock amidst the chaos. As the weeks turned into months, I found a rhythm. I enjoyed the little things: Saturday morning pancakes, trips to the library, and our movie nights filled with laughter. I started to reconnect with hobbies I had neglected during my marriage. I dusted off my guitar and began playing again, losing myself in the music. It was therapeutic, a way to channel my emotions into something productive and fulfilling. Then came the news that would shake things up once more. One evening, while I was putting Alex to bed, I received a text from Jessica. It was a simple message, but it hit hard. "We need to talk. I think it's time to discuss Alex's future." My heart sank. I had expected this moment to come at some point, but I wasn't prepared for it now. I spent the next few hours tossing and turning, trying to decipher what she meant. Was she going to try to reinsert herself into my life? Was she planning to ask for more custody? The questions swirled in my mind, keeping me awake. The next evening, I met her at a local cafe, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. I wouldn't let her dictate the terms of our new reality. When I arrived, Jessica was already seated, her expression a mix of apprehension and resolve. I took a deep breath and sat down across from her, preparing myself for whatever was about to unfold. "I appreciate you meeting me," she began, her voice steady but laced with tension. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about Alex." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean about us?" "We've both made it clear that our relationship has changed." "I know," she said, her voice softening, "but I think it's important that we work together for his sake. I want us to co-parent effectively, and I realize I've made mistakes. I don't want to be the villain in this story. I want to show him that his parents can get along." Her words struck me as sincere, but I couldn't help but feel suspicious. "And what does that mean for us?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "I think we should consider therapy together," she suggested cautiously. "Not to fix our marriage, but to learn how to communicate better. I want Alex to have a strong relationship with both of us." I paused, weighing her proposal. Part of me wanted to reject it outright. The woman who had betrayed me was now asking for a seat at the table like nothing had happened. But another part of me recognized the importance of having a stable co-parenting dynamic, especially for Alex's sake. "Okay, I'm open to the idea," I said slowly, "but it has to be clear that this is strictly for Alex. I won't allow you to manipulate the situation again." Jessica nodded, her expression earnest. "I understand. I want what's best for him, too." As we talked further, I could see that she genuinely wanted to repair the damage. The conversation felt different than our previous exchanges. There was a willingness to engage and communicate openly. We discussed our boundaries and how to approach potential therapy sessions. It was awkward, but I could sense the tension easing a little. Over the following weeks, we began attending sessions with a family therapist who specialized in co-parenting. It was a strange experience at first, sitting across from Jessica in that sterile office as we talked about our feelings and frustrations. But surprisingly, the sessions began to help me understand her perspective, and I could see her trying to take responsibility for her past mistakes. I learned about the pressures she had felt as a new mother, the ways she had coped poorly, and how those choices had led her to seek validation in a way that hurt our family. I also opened up about my struggles with feeling neglected and how I had buried my own needs for the sake of the marriage. It felt cathartic to voice these things, and it was encouraging to have a mediator helping us navigate the conversation. As the therapy sessions continued, I witnessed gradual change. In Jessica, she began to show more accountability and started making an effort to be a better co-parent. There were still bumps in the road, emotional outbursts and miscommunications, but those moments were far less frequent as we learned to communicate more effectively. As spring blossomed into summer, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't anticipated. I still had a long way to go in terms of rebuilding trust, but I could see a path toward a healthier co-parenting relationship. The focus was no longer on the betrayal but rather on Alex, and that was a transformative shift for both of us. Yet, even as things improved on the surface, I knew I couldn't allow myself to forget the hurt Jessica had caused. That betrayal lingered like a bitter aftertaste, a reminder that I needed to prioritize my emotional health and boundaries moving forward. I refused to let my guard down completely, but I also recognized that healing sometimes comes from unexpected places. With each therapy session, I felt myself becoming more balanced and confident. I had taken charge of my life, embraced my independence, and was learning how to navigate this new chapter with resilience. I still had moments of doubt, but I was no longer defined by Jessica's actions. I was carving out a new identity, one that allowed me to grow in ways I never expected. With summer approaching, I looked forward to spending more quality time with Alex, planning trips, and creating memories that we could cherish together. I was determined to make every moment count, to ensure that my son felt loved and secure in the midst of the changes. As the sun set on those long summer days, I reflected on how far I had come. I had journeyed through heartbreak to find acceptance and strength, and I was finally beginning to understand the true meaning of independence. I realized that in reclaiming my life, I was also teaching my son valuable lessons about resilience, love, and forgiveness. As summer rolled into full swing, I found myself at a crossroads once again. The therapy sessions with Jessica had brought an unexpected sense of closure to our tumultuous relationship. We were slowly learning to communicate, and Alex seemed to be thriving amidst the changes in our family dynamic. I could see the improvements in her parenting, and it sparked a glimmer of hope in me that perhaps we could coexist peacefully for Alex's sake. However, with that comfort came a nagging fear. Would I always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop? Trust is a fragile thing, and while I appreciated Jessica's efforts, I couldn't shake the memories of how easily she had once betrayed me. I realized that I had to take the next step not just for Alex but for myself. I needed to carve out my own path, free from the shadows of our past. One evening, after yet another successful co-parenting dinner at my place, I found myself reflecting on my progress. Alex was in his room playing video games, and Jessica and I were sitting together on the couch, our conversation drifting from light-hearted to contemplative. "You know, you're doing really well," she said, surprising me. "I can see the changes in you. It's good for Alex." I nodded, acknowledging her compliment but also feeling a surge of protectiveness. "I appreciate that, Jess. But I also want to make it clear that while I'm committed to co-parenting, my focus has to be on my own journey too. I can't lose sight of what I've rebuilt for myself." She looked at me with newfound respect, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was having a real conversation with the woman who had once been my partner. I get that. I've realized how important it is to respect your space. I've made mistakes, and I know I can't take back what I did. I just hope we can keep moving forward. Her words struck me as sincere, and I took a deep breath, allowing myself to accept that maybe we could coexist without the weight of resentment for the past. Moving forward sounds good, I replied, but it's also about ensuring boundaries. I need to prioritize my happiness. I've learned that I can't depend on anyone else for my happiness, not even you. That evening marked a turning point. I felt lighter, as if I had finally released some of the emotional baggage I had been carrying. Although I had been through hell, I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more attuned to my needs. I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life. In the weeks that followed, I plunged into self-discovery. I signed up for a local guitar class, something I had always wanted to do but had put on the back burner. I also took up hiking, seeking solace in nature's beauty and embracing the thrill of physical challenges. With each step, I was reclaiming parts of myself that I had neglected for too long. I found joy in the little things, exploring new trails, reaching summits, and playing music with newfound friends. These activities filled my life with a sense of purpose that I hadn't realized I was missing. When Alex joined me on weekend hikes, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude that I could share these experiences with him. He flourished in the outdoors, his laughter echoing through the trees as we discovered new paths together. Despite the progress, there were still tough moments. I had to navigate the awkwardness of seeing Jessica with new friends and potential romantic interests, but I remained committed to our co-parenting relationship. I viewed each challenge as an opportunity to prove to myself that I was indeed stronger than the betrayal. I learned to celebrate small victories, reminding myself that healing takes time and patience. As summer began to fade into fall, I found solace in a new routine. I spent more time with friends, building a support system that uplifted me. I even took Alex to local community events where we met other families and forged connections that made our lives feel richer. But then, one evening, as I sat on my porch strumming my guitar, I received an unexpected text from Jessica. "Can we talk? I think it's time to talk about Alex's future again." My heart raced, and I felt a familiar tension rise in my chest. Still, I knew I had to approach this with the same sense of resolve I had cultivated over the past months. We met at our usual cafe, a neutral ground that had become a space for open dialogue. Jessica looked anxious, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "I've been thinking a lot about our arrangement," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "And I want to make sure that we're both on the same page moving forward." I nodded, my heart racing as I wondered what this could mean. "Okay, let's hear it. I've been seeing someone," she admitted, her gaze dropping to her cup. "He's nice and understands my situation, but I want us to have clear boundaries. I don't want it to interfere with our co-parenting." I felt a mix of surprise and relief. "That's good, Jessica. If you're happy, then that's what matters." I meant it. I had learned that for both of us to heal, we needed to prioritize our own happiness. "Can we agree to communicate openly about any changes? I don't want Alex to feel confused or caught in the middle," she said, looking up at me with sincerity in her eyes. "Absolutely. As long as we both commit to putting him first," I replied, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. Leaving that cafe, I felt lighter than I had in months. It was a new beginning, not just for Jessica and me, but for Alex as well. I realized that while the past would always be a part of our story, it didn't have to dictate our future. As I drove home, I reflected on how far I had come. I had navigated heartbreak and betrayal, but I had emerged with a clearer sense of who I was. I had taken control of my life, and I was excited about the possibilities ahead. In the end, my journey had taught me invaluable lessons about love, forgiveness, and resilience. I realized that independence was not just about being alone. It was about finding strength within myself to embrace what life had to offer. As I looked at the horizon, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that I could face whatever came next with courage and confidence, knowing I was finally in control of my own destiny.